Well, with just 3 weeks to go, all parties running for the Knesset will be exerting a final push before Election Day on March 17th. IBA's Eli Wogelenter asked Times of Israel editor David Horovitz about his thoughts on the campaign so far.
I still think it's open. I think anyone who tells you they know who's going to win, you should smile indulgently and then move on. Obviously, I think the betting is that Netanyahu will be re-elected. But this is volatile Israel. All kinds of things can happen, and we've seen all kinds of things have been happening. I think maybe the key point is that your sense is that nobody emerged to really challenge the public's perception that there's an alternative, that there's no alternative to Netanyahu. In other words, Isaac Herzog, Moshe Kachlon, Naftali Bennett, Yair Lapid, I don't think any of these are seen as really credible alternatives to Netanyahu. And although the polls between the parties are shifting around a little bit, the one thing that's consistent is Netanyahu is a long way ahead of other candidates when it comes to the public's belief as to who will be the next prime minister and even their preference.
Can you not see a possible scenario where, despite the high numbers of those two parties, the math won't work out and someone else will have to be chosen by President Rivlin to form a government?
Yeah, I think it's possible that there are two electorates, right? There's the people who vote on March the 17th, and then there's the political leaders who troop in to see President Rivlin after the votes have been counted. If the Likud is not dominant, if they don't do fairly well, I think, there is so much animus to Netanyahu within the Knesset that I think many of these party leaders would want to do almost anything, certainly a great deal, to prevent Netanyahu being re-elected. So if it's not clear that Netanyahu and the Likud really have overwhelmingly a better prospect of forming a coalition, there will be some will within the political system to try and deprive Netanyahu of re-election.
Everybody always criticizes the whole process. Do you see anything positive about this election campaign?
Well, I don't know which aspects of the process do people criticize. People criticize the pure proportional representation system. People talk about the
campaign itself, the dirtiness of it, the lack of focusing on issues, the jokes that are made in the videos as opposed to seriousness.
Well, first of all, let's not delude ourselves that it's a serious and substantive process in other countries necessarily. I'm thinking of some of the American Senate and congressional campaigns where a 30-second campaign ad can get you elected. I think there's a lot of personality politics everywhere in the democratic world. It's up to the public. I think if people made plain that they sought answers on specific issues, and the more that they do, and the more that people come up with answers, the politicians would have to react. If some politicians did it better, I think it's a back and forth with the public. What I think is notable in this campaign is how polarized the media is. So especially the newspapers, I think more than in the past, if I'm not mistaken. I think this
in their anti-Bibi rhetoric.
I think the split. You've got your Yisrael Hayom, for whom Netanyahu can do no wrong, and you've got Yediot and Haaretz. But I think especially shrilly Yediot in this campaign. I think they're more hostile to Netanyahu. That's just my sense. Although they were certainly not in the Netanyahu camp before, I think the bitterness there, the Yisrael Hayom Yediot bitterness, is more stark than in the past. I actually think in previous elections that I remember, the advertising and the commercials have not been as dominant as they are potentially being this time. I think that I've been quite struck by some of the commercials in which Netanyahu himself has starred. The one where he's the babysitter and he says you don't want to leave the kids with Tzippi because by the time you get home she might have gone over to the neighbors. It's funny. It doesn't matter which side of the spectrum you're at. There'll be people who say, yeah, well, he's better at doing commercials than running the country if you're an opponent of Netanyahu. But those commercials, I think, have been quite effective. We've seen the whole expenses scandal and apparently not affecting the polls significantly. But, again, all these things can play out. We don't know how the Congress speech is going to play out. We don't know if some of the other parties are going to exert themselves more effectively. I think, in retrospect, it may be that Messrs. Kachlon and Lapid come to regret that they didn't merge, and I think Lapid wanted to and Kachlon didn't. But, it's still a ways to go.
In regional news,